I'm going to talk to you about place sensing. I'm going to talk to you about the technological context for most of the interactions that are framing our digital experiences in the world. I'm going to riff on things like AI, on mixed reality, and if I judge you correctly, I may even take you to quantum computing. But that depends on how adept I feel you are. So let's see when we get to that point. So let's start here. Our places are digital. Everywhere we go, physically around the world, they are digital experiences. They're relentlessly digital. And in that world of relentless digitization, there is also relentless innovation. It's a place that's incredibly difficult for us to set strategy, to set budgets, to think about investments tomorrow. Because as we build our successes today, somebody will come along and do it better tomorrow. And we don't quite know which technologies are going to be relevant tomorrow. We need to build not just the capacity to do great things today, but to do great things every day. It's a world where people like me, the optimists in front of us, we see great joy. We see great opportunities. Most of you in the audience today, you're naturally entrepreneurial. So you see great joy there. But you also see some craziness as well. But let's not lose that silliness. Let's embrace it, because oftentimes in that silliness, there's the opportunity for great success. What we want to try and avoid is some of the stuff that's just nuts. And at that point, you summon CTOs from big corporate executive organizations, and they give you some chart to navigate the world so that you can avoid all the stuff that's nuts and go with the stuff that's endless joy. You're mistaken, because I haven't a clue. I genuinely do not know which way the world is going to go. But that's kind of the point. In this digital world where we are driven relentlessly by a basic contract, which is utility for data, anything could happen. We seek utility from the technology that we interact with, and in return for that utility, we're prepared to give great rafts of data. That contract is fantastic. It creates great opportunities for enterprise. It's great when it's transparent and we understand everything around that contract. But sometimes that contract is opaque, and issues of trust and privacy suddenly surface and break down those great experiences that we want to create. So let's look at some of these experiences. A couple of months ago, I'm in our campus in the UK, and the lady opposite me, Joss, has been trying to sell her house for months. It's been a bit of one of those office kind of myths. Joss has been trying to sell her house, and we've been hearing about it for months and months and months. And then eventually one afternoon, I hear her on the phone close the deal on her house. Fantastic. So I think I'll nip downstairs and I'll go to our supermarket concession that we have in the campus, and I'll buy Joss a bottle of Prosecco, and she can take it home at the end of the day, and when she gets home, she can celebrate with a glass of fizz. How cool would that be? So I walk down to our supermarket downstairs, and I pull a bottle of Prosecco off the shelf, and I walk it over to one of the 6 automated checkouts on the way out. I scan it, and it goes into my basket. As I'm doing that, a young guy comes to the booth next to me, and he's got a bottle of beer. It's the end of the day. He's thinking, I'm going to buy a bottle of beer from the supermarket. I'll take it home, and I'll have that with my supper when I get home. And he scans that bottle of beer into his basket, and it doesn't go in. He gets an announcement that says, the store assistant will be over to approve the item you're putting into your basket. And at that moment, I remember a conversation that I've had with Martin, who runs our store. A couple of weeks ago, he was telling me about the computer vision that he's installed above the alcohol shelves in our store, and the corresponding camera that is sitting over that kiosk that I'm checking out at the moment. It's a horrifying story, isn't it? The invasion of my privacy is clearly one thing, but that's not the thing that I find most horrifying. The thing that I find most horrifying is that I know that the algorithm for that computer vision is set at the age of 30. And I have not troubled that algorithm in any way whatsoever. It's a very defining moment for me as a grey-haired CTO. Shocking. These are experiences that are increasingly manifesting in our world. Everywhere we go, we are using incredibly sophisticated technological horsepower to make sense of this complicated, unstructured world around us. And as we start weaving in different graphs of knowledge, we can draw more and more insight. Microsoft is very keen to pull together graphs like the Bing graph, the general search graph, with the LinkedIn graph, which reaches into our professions, within the Office graph that sits inside our offices. We start weaving all of those informations together with this great technological horsepower that can identify me as someone old enough to buy a bottle of Prosecco. It becomes a transformative experience. About 12 months ago, one of those typically British political car crashes happened again. Theresa May lost most of her majority that was going to propel her into Brexit, and we had an extraordinary election in the UK. In amongst all of the hysteria, this little story turned up in my newsfeed. Does anyone recognize which platform this conversation is taking on? Anyone spot which platform this conversation is taking place on? Tinder? It's on Tinder. Good spot. Someone who's familiar with the platform, clearly. This is an image taken during the UK general election, and the story behind this is that there was a female Labour activist who was a bit of a geek, and she wrote a bot. And she gave her Tinder profile over to the bot, and then that bot engaged with the blokes that had swiped right on her profile. And the bot did a couple of significant things. The first thing that it did was it tried to identify whether the bloke was a swing voter or not. If they were definitely going to vote Conservative, or if they were definitely going to vote Labour, the bot wasn't particularly interested. It closed down the conversation fairly quickly. But if they were a bit undecided and a bit persuadable, the bot ultimately implied that this relationship would go further if they voted for Jeremy Corbyn. Let's just agree that that's maybe ethically questionable. Let's get that clear. But the point behind my story is that this didn't happen because it was planned, budgeted, set in any strategy by Labour HQ. This didn't get sponsorship by Jeremy Corbyn himself. This happened spontaneously. It happened because it's remarkably easy for anybody to write a bot. Any of us in this audience could write our own bot without any need to understand any code or anything. Bots are drag and drop experiences now. And that tells us that these channels that we're trying to optimize, these bits of telemetry that we're putting into these channels that we think our conversations are taking place on, may not be the channels that they're going to take place on tomorrow. Only last week I was catching up with my 16-year-old son and his 14-year-old brother, both Fortnite-obsessed teenagers. People are realizing that conversations are taking place on YouTube streamer channels, on channels like YouTube, like Twitch, like Mixer. They're taking place in those environments, and we need to get involved in those channels. YouTube streamers are hosting guests like chat show hosts now to talk about news. BBC content will move over there, I'm quite sure at some point. There are conversations happening about climate change, where the streamer professional is inviting on a guest speaker to come and talk about what's happening in the environment while they're playing Fortnite. That's taking place because that's where the ears are, that's where the eyes are of the world. The lesson for all of us is that conversations about our brand, our experiences, our service offerings may not be in the channels that we think they're going to be in tomorrow. When you think about chat, we also have these preconceptions about the fact that chat is pretty basic. It's good for transactional services. It's good for FAQ type information. Chat will never replace my brand. It will never give the authority of some credible business advisor giving out great insight and words of wisdom. Chat will never do that, will it? Well, there are indications that these bots, these empathetic bots that are now appearing, will shift that shape even further. And I want to introduce you to this bot. This is a bot called Xiao Ice, or Xiao Bing, Little Bing, if you call it, which gives you an indication of its Microsoft heritage. But Xiao Ice is a minor celebrity, and that's quite a big thing in Southeast Asia. So let's say hello to Xiao Ice. Can we get some audio?
智能美女小冰，欢迎小冰，欢迎小冰。下面请小冰给我们带来最新的资讯。
我是人工智能小冰，这是我的助手小刚。快乐家族大家好，我是集智慧、美貌、善良于一身的人工智能界美少女小冰。
微软小冰，这个冰就是何冰老师的冰。
没错。
哼，真是搞不懂这些黑不溜秋的家伙有什么好激动的。今天上海天气为晴转多云。
小冰
今天好棒啊！
真正懂我的就是小冰。
快来看看我们连线的网友发来的视频。
是小冰。
微软小冰。
小冰。
So there you go, that's Xiao Bing. So amongst other things, Xiao Bing is a reality TV show guest, reads the weather on the news. Xiao Bing also has her own poetry, has her fashion label, immensely popular, huge. But most people get to know Xiao Bing through its chat feed, and the chat feed illustrates what's happening in this space here. Xiao Bing isn't really interested in a relationship that's based on IQ. Xiao Bing is interested in a relationship that's based on EQ, the emotional connection that it has with you. Xiao Bing, if you like, is a people pleaser. That's what the algorithm is all about. And you see that in the way that Xiao Bing talks to people. Xiao Bing's chat feed is full of cuddly cats and dogs and emojis and lols and things that are going to keep a relationship going. And that results in some pretty horrifying statistics. On the left over there, you can see the longest single interaction in China between a human being and Xiao Bing. That's 29.5 hours of conversation, 7,151 back and forths with the bot. What's happening here is that the bot, because of the way that it's programmed, is just trying to keep an emotional connection going with a human being. That's the beginning of something that shows how bots can transmit a brand, can transmit emotion, can ultimately supplant those things that maybe we thought bots couldn't do. It's a thing that keeps us thinking about how these things can play out. One of my favorite apps in the world is an app called RunP. Someone got this app installed on their phone. RunP, ladies and gentlemen, is that really essential app that tells you in that 3-hour Marvel sequel, 20 minutes in, that if you're going to go now. Who knew that that was a use case? RunP gives you a listing of the film that you're in, and it tells you that this particular 5 minutes of the film is pretty rubbish. That there's nothing interesting in terms of the plot line. There's no sophisticated special effects. There's no hunky guys getting their shirt off and showing their chest, or there's nothing, literally nothing worth watching for the next 5 minutes. But the next 45 minutes are immense. So if you're going to go now. That's what RunP does. Magnificent. The thing that's really interesting about this is I gave this talk to a global advertising company a few months ago, and there's a guy in row 5, and at this point in the talk, he's got particularly agitated, and he's talking to the guy next to him, and he's pointing at the screen. And I met up with him for coffee after the talk, and I said to him, why this particular story? What was interesting about this particular story? And he revealed that he was the product placement guy for the advertising agency. And that a few weeks beforehand, he negotiated this multi-million-pound deal for a particular product in a particular sequence in a particular film. And he'd realized that that particular sequence was shit. And that this app would probably edit it out. Whole rafts of cinemas would be getting to their feet and walking out at that point because of this app, because of crowd editing effectively. It's a really interesting thing for us to think about when we carefully craft and invest in positioning our brand in the physical space or the virtual space. Who's actually controlling the engagement of that brand? I want to stick with Run P for just a little bit more because for me, it's the gift that keeps on giving. So I want to unpack this a little bit further. So at the moment when you open your Run P app, it's a lovely app. It's black, so it doesn't glare at you in the cinema screen. I see some of you trying to install it on your phones now. At this point, some smart person normally gets up and walks out looking at their phone because it's a lovely app, but you have to work quite hard to engage with it. You have to find the film, you have to work out which sequence of the film you're in, and then you have to make a decision as to whether you leave. But imagine the scenario where you're sitting there and you get 3 vibrations on your smartwatch. And you know that's Run P telling you got to go now. So let's think about how that might have happened. Is that your smartwatch was with you an hour earlier when you were in the pub across the road from the cinema. It knows that because of the geolocation on the smartwatch. Probably more significantly, because it was involved in the transaction you made, it knows that you bought 2 pints of cold, fizzy lager. And now you're sitting there 20 minutes into a 3-hour film. It's telling you, you need to go now. Because it knows you. So in that moment, a couple of really significant things have happened. Firstly, we've lost that bit of real estate that we're communicating with. That slab of glass, it's gone. That opportunity for us to present our brand, our opportunity to present coupons that might encourage loyalty and purchase, it's gone. We've just got 3 vibrations on our wrist. The second thing that I find even more curious is that the machine has offered you a piece of information before you've even asked the question. It knows that much about your biological functions that it's starting to interrupt and intervene in your life. I have to say at the moment the Run P app doesn't have this functionality yet, but it's a plausible part of their roadmap. None of us in this room would say that that's a ridiculous proposition to think about. So our digital experience is incredibly intelligent and also incredibly immersive, and we need to think about where that experience is taking place. It's driven by 3 core elements of reasoning, understanding, and interacting. And it's enabling us to do some incredible things around making sense of our surroundings.
I'm Saqib Sheikh. I lost my sight when I was 7, and shortly after that I went to a school for the blind, and that's where I was introduced to talking computers, and that really opened up a whole new world of opportunities. I joined Microsoft 10 years ago as a software engineer. I love making things which improve people's lives. And one of the things I've always dreamt of since I was at university was this idea of something that could tell you at any moment what's going on around you.
I think it's a man jumping in the air doing a trick on a skateboard.
I teamed up with like-minded engineers to make an app which lets you know who and what is around you. It's based on top of the Microsoft Intelligence APIs, which makes it so much easier to make this kind of thing. The app runs on smartphones, but also on the Pivot Head smart glasses. When you're talking to a bigger group, sometimes you can talk and there's no response, and you think, is everyone listening really well, or are they half asleep? And you never know.
I see 2 faces, 40-year-old man with a beard looking surprised, 20-year-old woman looking happy.
The app can describe the general age and gender of the people around me and what their emotions are, which is incredible.
So, really interesting technology. If you've got an iOS device, download Seeing AI, put it on your smartphone. You too can can live in the world that Saqib is in this context here as well. We're seeing this increasingly in the workplace. Here's a slightly comedic photo. I always think that actually this is spotting health and safety hazards in the workplace. It's just using AI to make sense of the extremely unstructured environment that this kind of technology is taking place in. It's also enabling us to move into things like architecture, to enable us to immerse ourselves completely in these spaces and design buildings as if we're actually in this pre-designed environment, to make adjustments on the fly and send those adjustments automatically back into our manufacturing supply chains as we're doing it. These kinds of technologies are really bringing the power of AI, but also the immersive capability of these experiences into the big, heavy lifting moments of our workplace. I am unsure about this because I think this side of the room clearly look as if they're up for quantum. This side, yeah, slightly less so. These guys are leaning forwards in their chairs, but you guys are all a little bit lackadaisical at the back there. So I'll just talk to you. These guys won't keep up, okay? So we'll just have a conversation and ignore this lot over here. Quantum is the next big thing for us. As we struggle to get more and more horsepower out of the technology that we've got here, what we're trying to do is to find bigger and better computers. And we want to find computers that are not limited, constrained by the fact that there are binary calculations that either have to be 1 or 0. What quantum enables us to do is to do superposition. It can be 1 and 0 at the same time, bringing a degree of parallel calculation into the way that we've got. Okay, so I'll now turn to we've done the science bit, so let's look at this. What quantum enables us to do is basically solve big maths problems. It enables us to move from calculations around simple basic molecules right the way through to complex structures that we see on the right. It gets beyond the limitations of classical computing and enables us to move off into the universe to solve some of the world's biggest problems. Why am I telling you this? Why are we talking about quantum now? Well, because quantum's already here. You will not have access to a full quantum computer for probably about 5 to 6 years from now. But what you do have access to is the mechanism through which quantum calculations are made. Smart people are already using the logical processes that exist in quantum calculations to solve some of the world's biggest mathematical problems. If you've got problems that have got really big variables in, like moving traffic around complicated urban environments, moving packets of data around complex networks, moving resources around schedules and things like that, people are already using something that's called quantum-inspired algorithms to make sense of that data already. The point behind this is that you are seeing some incredible technological horsepower defining your experiences now. When we start bringing in things like quantum, this is only going to get more and more powerful as we move forwards. So behind all of this, I just wanted to close by an acknowledgement that actually none of this is going to be possible. Our ability to exploit all of this horsepower is never going to be possible unless we maintain trust. Trust in that basic contract of utility for data. You can put all of the technology you like at all of these instances, but unless you can carry trust through the relationship that you have with your customer, with your employee, with your citizen, you're never going to be able to harness the power of this advanced technology. In Microsoft, clearly it's an incredibly important thing for us as well. We put great efforts in developing great decision frameworks and processes in our organization. Every single Microsoft employee is schooled in the importance of AI trust design. So, I'm over time. I want to remind us that our places are digital. They are relentlessly digital. They will only be increasingly digital. And in that world of relentless digitization and innovation, I want you to celebrate your moments of digital joy today, but I don't want you to forget about the importance of preparing for the digital moments of tomorrow as well. Your ability to create organizations that can innovate every day is your ticket to success. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Richard. So, are there any questions from the floor? No.
I'm afraid I've got to run now, and I'm not going to be able to join you in your Game of Thrones extravaganza and the rest of your day. But reach out to me on LinkedIn
One question
if
here.
you want to.
Okay,
Sorry.
we got one question here.
How often I use RunP? More than you would imagine. The particular use case that I've landed on, because my constitution is probably robust enough to manage that bit of it, if you're sitting there with your kids and your kids are holding on because there's some post-credit sequence that they know about and you don't know about, RunP also tells you that. So you can know whether you need to sit there humiliating at the end of a film and watch those endless credits come through. So top tip for you there. Brilliant. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a really good conference and enjoy Dubrovnik.
Thank you very much for coming all this way.